Chapter 27, Growth and Development of the Preschooler. We're going to talk a little bit in this chapter, same as we did in the last two, about physiologic, cognitive, psychosocial changes. We're going to talk about their language development, some concerns in the preschooler development. We're going to talk about health and the nurse's role. Nutrition, we're going to look at some common problems and then some anticipatory guidance. There's your Pima outcomes. Okay. So the preschooler is going to be your 3 to 6 year old, and lots of growth, but slows a little bit. They start doing more tasks, so learning more learning more skills. So they gain a little bit of weight during the year. They start to lose that baby fat and grow more muscle. Their jaw is getting prepared for teeth. When we think about organ systems, the myelinization of the spinal cord is going to prepare them for potty training. Your Erickson stage would be initiative versus guilt. So they're very inquisitive. The preschoolers, if anybody has preschoolers, they love to talk, they love to tell stories. So they really like being able to do things like having a job. Sometimes when I'm starting an IV, I will have the preschooler hold the saline flush and tell them that's their job to hold that, or the tape or something. Give them a job, they concentrate on that, and they feel very, very important when they have that type of job. So when they have a sense of guilt, and so when they do tasks, when they do new things, if they aren't made to feel adequate, then they will have this sense of guilt. They often have a sense of guilt if their parent is ill or their brother got sick or hurt. They just hold this sense of guilt with them. So that enhancing self-esteem is very important. Piaget is our theorist for cognitive development, and one of the most important things of this age group is they're magical thinkers. They have the imaginary friend. They they put lifelike qualities to inanimate objects, so that's called animism. So, they will have you talk to their doll or their toy, things like that. And then transduction is that they use some reasoning, even though things aren't related. And the magical thinkers, if you think about, some kids have fear of a monster under the bed. Sometimes you even have to go to the point of using monster spray, which is a spray bottle with water, to get rid of them. They think that they can do more than they can because they can't really separate between reality and fantasy yet. And so they think they can jump off the refrigerator and fly. And so we really have to be aware of this at that stage. They think their thoughts are powerful. They think that their imaginary friends are real. And so we have to kind of be aware of that. Moral, we talk about Kohlberg and talks a little bit about punishment. I try not to get into punishment too much. I don't feel like that's my place to really advise parents on discipline because that is a personal, practice. And so I just try not to. If they're asked about it, I certainly would give some knowledge that I have, or I do make them follow the rules in the hospital if they're a patient. They can't run around and act like crazy people. But the preschoolers, I do enjoy taking care of them. They typically have stories, like I said. Sometimes their stories get longer and longer. I remember asking a little girl about, how she hurt her arm, and she started off like the week before of she was playing with her friend, and her mom's like, okay, let's get to the point. She fell off the monkey bars. But they do like stories, so I do enjoy talking to them, um, and listening to their stories. So um, let's go here. Let me tell you just about physical. I'm going to back up for a second. When it comes to physical growth, their alveoli are continuing to increase, and they should have the same number of adults around 7. Their eustachian tubes, so in their ears, are short and straight, and which puts them at risk for ear infections. Their heart rate starts to decrease, blood pressure increases, and then one of the other things about growth is they have a very short urethra, and so that really makes them prone to urinary tract infections. So also their bones are increasing in length, but they still could have a lot of injuries because they're not fully formed. Gross and fine motor skill development. So I know that we talked a little bit about that in the toddler, and so their musculoskeletal system is more mature, and they have more and more skills that they can do as they grow into that toddler, preschooler age. They're a little bit less clumsy, and their fine motor skills are more refined. So they can do more tasks, things like that. Hearing, usually no problems with hearing because if it's intact at birth, it should remain intact. Smell and touch develop further into preschool. They start to have, the younger preschooler has what they call a less discriminating sense of taste, which means that they'll eat things that wouldn't taste good to somebody else. I remember taking care of a little girl who had drank half a bottle of rubbing alcohol, and any one of us couldn't even get past the smell. But so accidental ingestion is a big problem. Their visual acuity seems to be getting better too. As far as language, they still have that telegraphic speech where they use short sentences. I kind of liken it to texting. Sometimes I can't even understand my husband's text because it's so telegraphic. But they start to extend their vocabulary in this stage, depending on the amount of interaction they have with caregivers. So they are not abstract thinkers yet, but very much can understand a lot more than they can say, but they're starting to develop more word language. They can pick up on the parents' moods and emotions, which sometimes can be a problem. Cultural, so we think about cultural in the fact of different types of diet, discipline. Again, asking the family about the beliefs, things like that, is important. So emotional development. So they are starting to have friends, imaginary friends and real friends. Usually they're entering kindergarten or preschool. They will be very social little beings. They have strong emotions. They're developing that sense of identity. The temperament is it's an indicator of the parental expectation. So again, routines, rituals are really important. They're afraid of loud noises. They can relate things to certain memories. So if something bad happened in this one place, then they can remember things like that. I noticed when my grandson was a preschooler, we went to the movies, and it was so loud he couldn't stand it, and I had to take him out. And then from then on, when they would go to the movies, they would give him headphones to lessen the sound because it was just so loud for him he couldn't take it. And that happens with some kids too. And so As far as the memory, kids remember when they go to the doctor's office what happened last time. This little person down here is Doc McStuffins. So Dora goes to the doctor and Doc McStuffins. Those have all really helped kids anticipate going to the doctor, getting shots, getting their temperature taken, things like that. It's helped. I remember a little girl that came in and she held her arm out and said for me to take her blood pressure and her finger up for her pulse ox. And then she said, am I going to get my shot now? So kids are a little bit more prepared than before because of these types of shows. And let's see. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about their growth and development. It should be orderly and sequential. I told you about being magical thinkers and that sense of guilt. So they will feel guilty. They have to be reassured. You have to build up their self-esteem. Again, routines and rituals are important. They are into cooperative play. So we went from solitary play to parallel play, now cooperative play, and that magical thinking. Development delays, just kind of just review that table on page 1031. It's table 27.4. It has some things that we should look out for. So under language, so once they start developing more language skills, they have symbolic thoughts. They do not understand the concept of death. So if there's a death in the family, like either a grandmother, grandfather, something like that, or an animal, they don't understand. They feel like the person or the dog, cat, or whatever is coming back. So that's really hard for them to understand that that person isn't. So they are able to express, like I said, they're talkers, they're storytellers, and they're really transitioning into the middle preschooler, older preschooler, into that less telegraphic speech and more like adult sentences. So it's quite funny. My grandson's 8 and he texted me today and he used the word officially like 4 times in the sentence. So he must have learned that word in his vocabulary words or something because he was using it a lot today. So he told me officially he did not have COVID, which that wasn't a concern anyway, but he just wanted me to know that. So safety. So safety is a big thing in this age, just as it is in the toddler. They're doing more things. They're running, they're jumping, they're climbing. Accidental injury is really a problem. They're capable of learning rules. And so teaching them right and wrong is important. They're at an ideal age to be taught about safety. So helmets, bike helmets, car seats, things like that. If people raise their kids, putting them in a car seat or a seatbelt when they're old enough, that gets to be their routine. So it's a lot easier on them. They want to do things. They want to get better at things. They like jobs. But their fantasy is really a strong suit of theirs. And sometimes it makes them not really think about cause and effect. So a lot of guidance is needed. Accidental injuries, so gun safety is a big one. I remember a 3-year-old that was shot, found a gun in the home that was loaded, shot himself in the stomach, and fortunately only nicked his diaphragm. But kids are fascinated with guns. And so another situation I had was I think he was 2, he shot himself in the finger, and the dad says that they keep their loaded gun in the cushions of the couch. So that obviously was a call to DCS because that's not a safe place to keep your guns. Safety, so car seats, still car seats, depending on their age when they go forward. We talked a lot about that. And one of the HP 2020 goals is to make sure that car seat and booster seat are used through the appropriate sizes and times. So, so handguns I talked a little bit about. Bicycles, so helmets, knee pads, elbow pads, poisons, which is spelled wrong. So again, they still may get into things that they shouldn't. Motor vehicle crashes, burns. We do see burns. Kids, when there's a fire in the home, will hide, and so sometimes they're hard to find when firefighters or families going in. Also, they may not know how to stop, drop, and roll yet, things like that. So, or they may go back in the home for the family pet and then get stuck in there. So, secondhand smoke, I think it was a law was passed in Arizona that if you smoke in your car, that could be a form of child abuse. Injuries, just when you think about kids running across the street, they can see the car, so they think the car can see them. And so sometimes there's a lot of pedestrian accidents. Water safety, still drownings. We want to prevent those. And one of the HP 2020 goals is to reduce the drowning deaths. So not leaving children unattended, educate families, and even though they have swim lessons, it doesn't mean that they don't need to be supervised. There should always be one water person that's watching out for kids. And that's, like I said, they're drawn to water. They may be playing in the backyard where there's a pool. The ball goes in the pool, and then they'll jump in. And drownings are very silent. There's not a lot of noise. They just quietly slip under the water. You don't really hear splashing or coughing or anything. So, as far as nutritional habits, preschooler has all their primary teeth, and they're using utensils. They really need a high diet of nutrient-rich foods. They do like junk food, so they're erratic eaters. So really helping to increase their calcium is one of the HP 2020 goals that that they recommend preschoolers be screened for calcium, the dietary intake of calcium, educating foods, and then helping choose those foods. So eating habits, yes, they do have they're picky eaters, limited amount of foods, same as the toddler, food fads, so eating the same thing every day. And so it's, if they're growing, they're doing well on their growth charts, then there's no reason to be concerned about it. But if not, then there'll be some investigation. Another 2020 goal is to prevent the incidence of obesity in kids. We talked about that in the last chapter, that, that's a real problem in the United States. The number of kids and adolescents that are overweight has doubled since in the past 30 years. So, and then overweight and obese children, it leads to hypertension, diabetes, strokes, all those things, insulin resistance. And if a high body mass is noted in a preschooler, it's associated with the adult as well as early onset of the metabolic syndrome. So basically, if a child's obese, that could follow them into adulthood. Even if they are no longer obese, they could still have the medical issues that an overweight adult would have. Okay. Sleep. So again, they should have 11 to 12 hours of sleep. So when you're at Walmart at midnight, as I used to go to when I worked 11 to 11 shift, and see all the kids running around, obviously they're not getting their 11 to 12 hours of sleep. Those rituals, I talked about the nightmares, the monster under the bed, because they can't differentiate between fantasy and reality. Night terrors, sometimes they will wake up during the night screaming. Having night lights, things like that are important, and actually a routine, so it's the same every night. Still need some supervision, brushing their teeth, even though they can do it themselves. We, as adults, have to check to make sure that they are actually doing a good job, avoiding sugary food, which they love. Discipline, so limits, like I said, talking to the parents if they ask you about it. Some of the concerns with this age is lying. So remember, they're those magical thinkers, and so it's very common because they have fears of punishment. So it's very common to lie, or it's their imagination that's just getting away from them. So the parents should really kind of think about a reason why the child's lying. Sometimes there's no rhyme or reason why they're lying, and then making sure that they're consistent with punishment or correction, things like that. Sex education, so they're really not able to interpret all they see, but they do hear a lot of things and see a lot of things. So, things on TV are very graphic sometimes, parents' conversations. And then sometimes they'll ask where babies come from. So, the thing is, before you go into a long, detailed, this is the sperm, this is the egg, you might want to just ask why they're asking. So sometimes at this age, a simple explanation will be okay for them, but you have to be simple and direct and honest. One of the other things they recommend is to teach them the proper words for their penis, their vagina, things like that. Masturbation is something that we see. They explore their own genitals. Some parents get upset about it, but it's a normal part of the preschool development. Unless if a parent overacts to it, then it could get worse. So just sort of ignoring it, tell them not to do it in public, and then that whole good touch, bad touch about not letting other people touch them, things like that, except for medical personnel. Okay, we are done with the preschooler.